Have you ever considered that European nations are actively planning to draft citizens again? Yeah, it sounds crazy, but this document completely shifts the perspective on exactly why. Welcome to Strategic Labs. Like and subscribe for more strategic insights. Okay, let's dive right into this. We're seeing a massive trend sweeping across Europe right now, and honestly, it's catching a lot of people off guard. We're talking about the return, and in some cases, the expansion of mandatory military service. Now, we have to address the elephant in the room here. You've probably seen the alarming headlines, right? With conscription literally returning to countries that had abandoned it decades ago, the immediate kind of panicked question on everyone's mind is simply this. Is Europe preparing for an imminent large-scale war? Like, are we looking at a scheduled countdown to World War III? Well, the short answer, no, it's really not. What we are actually seeing is less a flashing red light of imminent war and more a structural shift in risk management under, well, strategic uncertainty. The absolute core takeaway from our source material today is that European states are basically hedging their bets for a highly unpredictable future, especially after decades of just assuming large-scale war was totally off the table. So to cut through all that panic and noise, here is our roadmap for today's rapid-fire strategic analysis. We're going to cover 1. The post-Cold War illusion. 2. The map of conscription. 3. The 3 disruptive realities. And finally, 4. Signal versus noise. All right, starting off with Section 1, the post-Cold War illusion and how Europe lost its institutional memory. You know, the shift in European defense policy over the last 30 years has been absolutely drastic. After the Cold War ended in the 1990s, the general assumption was that large-scale interstate war in Europe was, well, highly unlikely. So what did they do? Militaries downsized, they shifted heavily to professional expeditionary forces. France actually abolished conscription back in 1997, and Germany followed suit in 2011. But then, bam, massive shocks to the system. The 2014 annexation of Crimea raised the initial alarms, and then, of course, the 2022 invasion of Ukraine fundamentally altered threat perceptions. It really exposed severe vulnerabilities in mobilization capacity and reserve forces across the entire continent. For the average citizen, it was this sudden, stark realization that the security umbrella they grew up under was actually kind of full of holes.
Moving right along to Section 2, the map of conscription, how geography dictates strategy.
So it's super important to note that not everyone abandoned the draft. Countries that share borders with potential threats or just prioritize strict territorial defense, think Finland, Estonia, Lithuania, Greece, Austria, and Cyprus, they maintained their conscription models. They literally never dropped them. But elsewhere, it's a scramble to rebuild. Latvia just reintroduced the draft in 2024. Croatia is planning to restore theirs by 2026. Denmark is even expanding theirs to include women, which is a major shift. Meanwhile, larger states like Germany and France are intensely debating these scalable, hybrid civic military models just to rapidly increase their ranks.
Okay, let's get into Section 3, the 3 disruptive realities. These are the true drivers behind the trend.
There are 3 undeniable realities completely reshaping modern defense right now. First up, mass plus technology. You see, modern warfare has proven that advanced, highly precise weapons absolutely do not eliminate the need for sheer manpower. High casualty rates still occur, making large reserves absolutely critical. Second, deterrence through readiness. Conscription isn't just about fighting wars, you know? It's about preventing them. If you can quickly mobilize hundreds of thousands of troops, you raise the cost of invasion so astronomically high that it deters conflict in the first place. And third, rebuilding institutional memory. By abolishing the draft decades ago, Europe largely lost its civil defense structures and those crucial reserve training pipelines. So now they're having to recreate these incredibly complex mobilization systems entirely from scratch. And look, these realities aren't happening in a vacuum. Governments are facing some serious, undeniable, practical constraints that are kind of forcing their hand. There's the security environment, obviously, particularly the proximity to Russia for Baltic and Nordic states. Then you have alliance dynamics. Within NATO, the expectations for burden sharing are rapidly rising. Everyone has to pull their weight. And finally, undeniable demographic issues. Europe is dealing with smaller professional armies, aging populations, and severe recruitment challenges. Conscription, quite simply, partially offsets those deep structural constraints. Which brings us to Section 4, signal versus noise. Let's break down the psychological preparation myth. All right, let's sharply separate the actual policy from the public panic. Here is what is actually happening. Governments are actively normalizing military preparedness in their public discourse. They're expanding resilience narratives, things like civil defense and crisis readiness. And they are definitely reintroducing the idea of civic duty tied to defense. But, and this is crucial, here's what is not happening. There is zero unified evidence that European governments are coordinating some massive continent-wide psychological mobilization campaign because they expect an imminent scheduled war. That is just the noise. Don't let it distract you. The reality is that Europe is shifting, as our source puts it, from an era of assumed peace to one of strategic uncertainty. They are hedging against a profoundly changed world. But this leaves us with a pretty heavy question to ponder. If the continent is rebuilding its capacity for war, are its citizens truly prepared to pay the price of deterrence? This is just a preview. For the full deep dive, check out our long-form explainer on the channel. See you in the next one.